talk a little bit about X-Men 97, which I did renew Disney Plus for, and I mean, it is what it is. Why don't we? I guess we can start chatting about that X-Men 97. So, if you know me, you know that I love the X-Men. X-Men was the first comic book franchise that I really, really fell in love with. I mean, I was a big Batman fan. I would say Batman is probably my first favorite superhero, but the first superheroes that I got really, really into was X-Men. And to this day, X-Men are my favorite. So, I spent a lot of time watching the Fox Saturday Morning X-Men cartoon, and I tracked down the Japanese music to the Japanese dub of that cartoon, and some of my most popular videos on the YouTube channel are my artwork set to the themes of the X-Men dub in Japan. This group named Ambiance, did it, and I'm a huge fan of Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and Mark Silvestri, and, as far as American comic books go, the pinnacle of American comic books was the late 80s and early 90s and the X-Men franchise. So, that there's nothing I hold more dear in terms of American comic books than X-Men. And, the reason I bought a Sega Saturn is because of X-Men Children of the Atom, which I saw at Court Lane's bowling alley, and immediately was just this is amazing. So I really, really like X-Men, and I really, really like the early 90s version of X-Men. So when I heard that X-Men 97 was coming on, I had thoughts. My expectations weren't particularly high, but I figured, what the hell, I'll give it a shot. And, I wasn't horrendously disappointed, but I wasn't super pleased either. Obviously, we're only 2 episodes in, but, we'll see how it goes. But, right off the bat, I'll just tell you what I don't like about X-Men 97. And then I'll tell you what I do like. What I don't like. They nerfed the sexiness of all the female characters, which is really stupid. The guys are all wearing skin-tight outfits, and the girls are not. You can't see and when you're drawing comic books, comic book art, American comic book art in particular, is figure drawing shorthand. So you're drawing ideal bodies in spandex. So basically, the whole point is, you're seeing what not with the exception of genitals, you're seeing basically the nude form, but played with in colors, right? So there's planes of the bodies that get color and rhythm, in rhythmic patterns, right? That's how superhero design works. So, and you can see that especially in the Jim Lee X-Men costumes. You can see with Wolverine and Gambit there, the plane of the pecs and the abs going down to the pelvis and the triceps. I think those are the triceps, those things that are right on the top of your arms. Those get colored yellow. The other stuff gets colored blue. The lower arm gets colored yellow, right? And so, if you take a look at, female designs, it's the same type of thing, But obviously every design is a little different, but that's the idea, right? So, skin-tight superhero costumes are part of the genre, and they're just clearly not making the female superhero costumes skin-tight because, God forbid, men find women attractive, anything that is done for a man's pleasure is considered bad now. So I found that kind of annoying. Um, but that's not the only thing I found annoying. The other aesthetic thing I found annoying, of which there are several, what the hell is up with Magneto's design and Professor X's design? Like, they look like they stood in a cold pool. You know how, like, when you're in a swimming pool for too long and your lips start turning blue and you start turning pale? Like, that is what Magneto's design looks like. And I don't understand why. Because there's, like, nothing in the comic books where he looks like that. Like, even in, like, I was reading X-Men 200, which the second episode of X-Men 97 is based on. And I have some things to talk about that. Magneto, the way that he looks in that comic, and every artist is different in American comic books, so Magneto does look, like, older than the way that Jim Lee makes him look. The way that Jim Lee makes Magneto look is the best. He makes him look like Don Johnson with a silver mullet, on steroids. But Magneto just looks kind of like an older, he looks like a 40-year-old with a little bit of wrinkly skin and white hair. That's how he looks in X-Men 200. In the X-Men cartoon, X-Men 97, like, they gave his face these weird wrinkles and purple lips, and not like the fun, like, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, like, purple lips. It's like they're doing, like, lipstick designs on everyone. Like, no, he just looks unnecessarily pale and awkward. He looks like Homer Simpson when he ate that sandwich and couldn't throw it out. And Professor X looks the same way. So that's annoying design-wise. Now, Gambit, there's been a lot of kind of people complaining that, Gambit was, like, wearing a crop top, which looked kind of odd. I mean, if you take a look, there's plenty of issues in X-Men where they're wearing street clothes in the early 90s, where they're wearing, like, really kind of over-the-top styles. So, I mean, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that, characters from the X-Men would wear a crop top, but that's, like, not really Gambit's style. Like, I have an issue, it's an Andy Kubert issue. And as much as I hate the New Orleans Saints, because they're the biggest piece of garbage football team that ever existed, but Gambit is from New Orleans, right? He's not from New Orleans, he's from Louisiana. I don't know if he's actually from New Orleans, but so it's like Gambit's, like, leisure wear is like bicycle shorts and a Saints jersey in, like, 5 o'clock shadow. And that's Gambit, So, like you just look at the comic books to find, like, their leisure wear. Instead, he's wearing this, like, weird pink crop top with some kind of, like, generic rock logo on it. I'm like, that's not really Gambit's vibe, But, I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility, like, someone from the X-Men would dress that way. I don't like Morph's new design. It doesn't go with his character. It's just not Morph in terms of the original portrayal of Morph from, the animated series. The whole, like, changeling Age of Apocalypse design that they've decided to give him so he can be neither man nor woman or something is just weird. So I don't really particularly like how they've kind of just radically changed Morph's design. But so there's that, like, the aesthetic wise. Now, it's not hand drawn like the original, and very few things will be hand drawn. So, it's the colors are very bold, which I like. They're very vivid, they're very solid. They do a good job of capturing, like, the color palette of a 90s comic, which is good, which is very good. But the animation is definitely stiff. It's not, like, horrendous, but it lacks warmth, and that is definitely something that just happens a lot when you do digital animation. At least it's 2D, so there's that. But it definitely feels more rigid. It's more consistent. I mean, you can find, like, the models are more consistent. I mean, like, you can find models all over the place in the kind of early 90s Korean animated Fox cartoon, I mean, sometimes, like, there's been all this drama about Rogue's butt, and it's like people will, and more often than not, she's supposed to look sexy, but, like, you could find plenty of off-model photos where they just kind of hastily drew her, and she's not as voluptuous in the original series. And certainly, like, the last season of the X-Men cartoon, they switched animation studios, and it looked very different. But even then, there's still a more of a warmth and a fluidity to the drawings than the kind of cold, kind of rigidness of the 97. But it's not that bad. I mean, I'm being picky because I like X-Men. So, I mean, I'm just going to speak my mind about this. What's going on in 1070? I'm talking about X-Men 97. So, the animation's stiff, the colors are nice, they've nerfed the women's sexuality, and Morph's design looks weird, and Gambit's leisure wear is not really his style or his character. So we've talked about that thus far, and Magneto looks oddly sick. I mean, he looks like he looks like Homer Simpson when he kept eating that sandwich behind the radiator, or looks like someone who had been standing in a pool that's too cold and his lips were turning blue. So the story, the way that it's starting out, the first episode, they try to pick up after the last episode, and it's kind of awkward the way that they do that, because in the last episode of X-Men, Professor X didn't really die. Now, again, they're using, like, X-Men 200, which deals with, like, the way that the series ended, and this happened in the comic books. Professor X was seriously ill. It looked like he was like gonna die. And so Lilandra, his girlfriend from the Shi'ar Empire, saved him, took him to, the planet Shi'ar, and, nursed him back to health with their super technology. But, they're acting like Professor X is just, like, dead in the series, which is kind of, that wasn't really how it ended, but whatever. And Professor X wills Magneto the school, which he did do more or less in the comic books. When Professor X looked like he was on his way out in terms of planet Earth, he told Magneto to take care of the school, because Magneto had kind of turned over a new leaf, more or less. Which then leads us to episode 2, which is like the trial of Magneto. Now, in the comic books, they did this at, like, an international French, it was kind of like The Hague, I guess. It was that kind of setting. In this, they did it at the UN. Now, it's not unusual for the X-Men animated series to use structural things from the comic book and swap in, new characters. So, like, for example, in Days of the Future Past, they used Bishop, the more current future character, as opposed to, Kitty Pryde. Speaking of Kitty Pryde, they used Jubilee instead of Kitty Pryde, to have, the spunky youngster character. So, there's that. So, I mean, it's not unusual for the cartoon to do things like that. But, like, I mean, it was obvious that they were trying to frame this as, like, being critical of conservative, like, white men. Like, there's literal, and they're kind of trying to force a January 6th analogy, on this, because in the comic books, there are, and this has always happened in the comic books, there's always people protesting mutants, right? So same thing, and there were people protesting Magneto. But in the comic books, you had these two neo-Nazi mutants that were mad at Magneto because Magneto had contributed to destroying Hydra, and plus Magneto was Jewish, you know. So they attack Magneto. I was watching X-Men 97 just now. Well, yeah, so see if you agree or disagree with my analysis. Right, so you had these like neo-Nazi mutants that were attacking Magneto, and they were attacking the international trial. Here in the American version, they have, you know, white male rage anti-mutant rioters who are referred to as insurrectionists, which is not an insurrection because the UN isn't a government. So anyway, they like, you know, they go in and they're storming the UN, and there's like smoke everywhere. It's supposed to be like these pictures that they take on CNN to try to scare you away from, you know, a certain political group or whatever. And yeah, it was just, it felt, there's this one part where this new bad guy called the Executioner, and but there's this line that he makes, this Executioner guy's like, I hate the whining, you know, we have it hard too, you guys just whine, we have it hard too. And it's just like, that is the typical, like, you know, yeah, like, you think you have it hard, but you really don't, because you have your privilege and you're a bigot, you know, and you're unenlightened and you're trash, you know. So like there was this, there was this kind of like subtext that was there, and X-Men has always had, like subtext about, you know, oppressed minorities, going back to the, you know, origins of the comic book, because the whole point of X-Men was that it started out as a Cold War allegory where Professor X and the mutants were supposed to be like the West, and Magneto and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants were supposed to be like the Soviet bloc and the Warsaw Pact. I mean, if you read the early comics, it's just blatantly obvious. But the thing with X-Men is that, rather than being celebrated, you know, they're feared superheroes. And then that leads to, you know, them being an oppressed group. And then you can plug in various oppressed groups to fit in, you know, the characters and what they deal with. So that's not new. But the way that it was done, it seemed kind of typically politicized based on the current climate. It looks like they're going to go off in a Madeline Pryor direction. If you see the end of, you know, episode 2, there's a great line in episode 2 where it's probably Madeline Pryor, but it might be Jean Grey, going into labor, and Wolverine's in the room, and she's like pregnant. And, like, Wolverine's watching the trial with her, because I guess she's too pregnant to go to the trial. And, you know, she's like, oh God, he's here. And Wolverine, like pops his claws. He's like, what is it, Apocalypse? And, she's like, no, it's the baby. And he's like, oh God, no. So he's like driving his Jeep trying to get her to the hospital. It's like, that was the best part of the whole 2 episodes. So was that. So, but you know, I definitely, after I watched those 2 episodes, I went back and I rewatched some of the original series, and I've got a bunch of episodes on tape, of the original series. So just to kind of refresh my memory to see if stuff was, you know, how well it was jiving. And, you know, it's definitely a step backwards, but I mean, it's fine. It's not like I hated it or anything like that. I'm curious to see what more episodes are going to be like. Oh, there's one more thing that really bugged me, about this. Jubilee's design, I don't like. Like, I understand that they're trying to make her look Asian, but she's got dead eyes. Like, there's no, like, life in her eyes. Like, Jubilee is supposed to be Chinese. She's supposed to be a spunky, wide-eyed, you know, mall rat Chinese American girl, right? And like she's usually drawn more in like an anime style, but her eyes definitely have like, you know, a taper to them because she's supposed to be Asian, right? But her eyes always have that kind of, like, especially the way like Jim Lee drew her and the way that she tended to be drawn in the 90s. She has like glassiness and reflectiveness in her eyeballs, you know, and she's usually has blue eyes, right? Like if you watch the, you know, the opening to the Japanese X-Men, and you know, like the TV Tokyo, like that is, yes, they also gave Rogue a flat butt, and I did talk about that, you know, and they also, they changed Jean Grey's outfit because like Jean Grey like had like a leotard, she had like kind of like a high cut at the waist and kind of like a thong in the back. And that was how she looked in the comic books. And then in the Saturday morning cartoon, which was supposed to be for kids, they still gave her that, but they kind of widened out the thong in the back to make it less like to soften it a little bit for the kids, you know. But they just totally got rid of that on her costume, and it just looks stupid, you know. And Storm, like I like Mohawk Storm, but her mohawk does not go with that white outfit. Like, it doesn't look good. Bishop is another one whose design they screwed up. What the hell is going on with Bishop? He's less buff, and he doesn't have his mullet, right? Like, what are you doing? You know, like, why does Bishop not have a mullet? I understand that, like, as the series progressed, eventually they, like, shaved his head, and I thought that looked incredibly stupid, despite the fact that I think, like, having a shaved head looks awesome. But, like, Bishop is supposed to have a mullet. Like, that's what he's supposed to look like. Bishop has a mullet, you know, and he doesn't have a mullet in this. So, anyway, in conclusion, X-Men 97. I mean, it's fine. It's definitely way better than X-Men Evolution, or Wolverine in the X-Men. On a scale of 1 to 10, as of the first 2 episodes, I'd give it a 6. Whereas the animated series, I would give a 10, the original one. Now, I would give Pride of the X-Men a 35, because the animation in Pride of the X-Men is, like, phenomenal. And the animation in the, you know, the Fox Saturday morning cartoon one is good, but it's inconsistent. But it's got the vibe of the comic book down.